Poor girl pretended to be ugly on a blind date, but the millionaire CEO didn't fall for it. He fell for her. She never intended to meet him. The plan was simple. Wear the worst dress she owned, smear her lipstick, throw on those ridiculous orange glasses, and scare him away. But when Sarah walked into that elegant restaurant, she hadn't expected the man waiting for her. His eyes didn't flinch, his voice was calm, and then with a small smile that cut straight through every mask she wore, he said, "You're trying to scare me off, aren't you?" She froze. "Let's make a deal," he continued. 3 dates, you try to push me away, and if you fail, you marry me. And in that moment, beneath her clumsy disguise, Sarah realized this wasn't going to be a game. This was going to be dangerous. The mirror reflected a stranger. Sarah tugged at the sleeves of the oversized dress, its puffy shoulders ridiculous even by thrift store standards. The crooked bun on her head was already unraveling, a few rebellious strands falling against her cheeks. The orange glasses perched on her nose made her look like a cartoon character trying too hard. Helena sat cross-legged on the bed behind her, biting back laughter as she applied the last streak of green eyeshadow to Sarah's lids. "You look hideous," Helena declared proudly. "Which means you're perfect." Sarah sighed. "This is insane." "It's brilliant," Helena grinned. "You'll scare him off before the appetizer. He'll run, tell my mom I'm hopeless, and I'll never have to explain that I'm still seeing Jason. You bribed me with $90. Technically, I offered you a chance to earn $90 and a 5-star meal." Sarah gave her a look through the thick lenses. "Emotional blackmail, Helena." Helena shrugged. "You said you needed the cash." And she was right. Sarah did need the cash. Between culinary school, 3 part-time jobs, night shifts at the cafe, and selling homemade sweets at Washington Square Park, she was barely holding everything together. Her mom's doctor visits, the rent, the bills, it was a balancing act that left little room for pride. One dinner, one ridiculous act, and then she could go back to her reality. "Fine," Sarah whispered, as much to herself as to Helena, "but promise me, if your mother finds out, you'll defend me." Helena smirked, with claws, teeth, and blue eyeshadow. The taxi pulled up in front of the towering glass entrance of La Marquise, the kind of restaurant people posted about but rarely actually entered. Sarah stepped out, feeling every pair of eyes that glanced her way. Her mismatched socks peeked out from under the hem of her dress, and the vintage shoes squeaked against the marble floor as she walked in. The maitre d' hesitated when she gave the name. "Eleanor Darte," Sarah said, nearly forgetting her role. "Of course, Miss Darte. This way." In the far corner, a man stood as she approached. For a moment, Sarah forgot how to breathe. He was unreal. His tailored suit fit like it had been stitched by angels. His posture was effortless, confident, and still. And his face? God, his face. Looked like it belonged on the cover of an exclusive magazine that cost more than her rent. He extended his hand, his voice smooth but carrying the faintest edge of amusement. "Miss Helena." Sarah blinked, her mind scrambling to keep up. "Depends. Are you here to sell encyclopedias?" His brow arched slightly. "No, I'm here to sell companies." "Then I'm her twin sister." A flicker of something passed through his eyes. Amusement? Perhaps curiosity. "William Scott," he introduced himself, his handshake firm but brief. Sarah sat down, painfully aware of the squeak her dress made against the leather chair. "I sell desserts in little jars," she blurted awkwardly, "so I guess we're even." His lips twitched. "Desserts, that's admirable." The waiter arrived, handing them both menus far too fancy for her comfort zone. She flipped through the list and whispered, "Anything here come in a jar?" William barely smiled. "I recommend the salmon with passion fruit reduction." "Reduction?" Sarah frowned. "I like my passion fruit in full force. If you've got something that explodes with passion fruit, let me know." He laughed, a low, genuine sound that made Sarah's stomach flip unexpectedly. For a brief second, she forgot she was supposed to be driving him away. She tried again. "I snore, I talk in my sleep, I have existential crises about ants." "Fascinating," he replied, still serious. "I like eccentric people." "I'm too ugly for you," she said flatly. "You should find someone prettier." "I've dated plenty of pretty women. I'm tired of them." His gaze held hers, unwavering. "I want someone truly ugly." Sarah narrowed her eyes. "What are you doing? Are you messing with me?" William set his menu down and leaned forward, his voice soft but unsettling. "On the contrary, I'm enjoying this. It's rare someone surprises me. You're either insane or you've got a very weird kink." "Neither." His voice dropped even lower. "But maybe I have a thing for people who don't try to impress me." Her throat tightened. There was something unsettling about how calm he was, like he was watching a puzzle slowly click into place. The conversation unfolded like a dance she wasn't trained for. Every attempt to repel him only drew him in closer. He was too composed, too observant. Then, when she least expected it, he laid his cards on the table. "You're trying to look unattractive on purpose, aren't you?" Sarah froze, her heartbeat hammered in her chest. "I don't know what you're talking about." He smiled gently. "The lipstick, the glasses, the dress. It's all deliberate." "And if it is?" she challenged, her voice trembling. "What are you going to do, call the fashion police?" William's eyes softened, but his voice stayed firm. "No, I think it's brilliant. Which is why I have a proposal." Sarah held her breath. 3 dates. You show up however you want. If by the end you manage to make me walk away, I'll pay you $5,000. She stared at him. $5,000. That money could cover her mother's tests, pay the bills, ease the weight on her shoulders. But it wasn't just about money anymore, not with the way he was looking at her. As though he already saw beneath every layer she tried to hide behind. "Well, why would you do this?" she whispered. William's voice was steady, almost too gentle. "Because you intrigue me. And because it's been a long time since someone looked at me and saw nothing they wanted, sucked for me to leave." Sarah swallowed hard, caught between the storm of desperation and something far more dangerous. "Hope. 3 dates, she finally said. "But I set the rules." "Name them." "No digging into my personal life. Public places only. And if I say I want to leave, you let me go. No questions." William smiled, a smile that reached his eyes this time. "Agreed." They shook hands. And as his fingers brushed against hers, a strange sensation jolted through her. Sarah pulled her hand back quickly, her mind already racing. This was a mistake. Or maybe, she thought as she watched him watching her, it was the beginning of something she couldn't yet name. Chapter 1. The Bet That Changes Everything. The rain drizzled softly against the windows of the small apartment as Sarah sat curled on the couch that night, staring at the signed napkin lying on her coffee table. William Scott's elegant signature, precise and smooth, stared back at her like a silent contract. 3 dates. $5,000, 0 cents if he gives up. Walk away if she wins. Helena paced across the living room, arms flailing, barely containing her excitement. "I still can't believe you agreed to this. You might have just solved your financial crisis in one insane dinner." Sarah pulled the blanket tighter around her. "Or I just sold my soul to the most confusing man I've ever met." "He's not just confusing, Sarah. He's rich. And let's not pretend you couldn't use $5,000 right now." Her voice softened when she saw the tired slump in Sarah's shoulders. Sarah glanced down, rubbing her thumb against the napkin's corner. "I didn't want it to be like this." Helena sat beside her. "You were brave. You tried to protect me from that setup, and somehow you got pulled into, well, whatever this is." Sarah exhaled. "He saw right through me, Helena. I barely spoke and he already knew I was faking. It's like he reads people like a book. Then you just need to make yourself unreadable." "That's what worries me," Sarah whispered. The truth was, William Scott unsettled her. His calm, steady presence made her feel as if she was standing under a spotlight with nowhere to hide. He didn't flirt. He didn't flatter. He simply observed. And somehow, that was far more dangerous. The second date came faster than she expected. It was a crisp evening in Central Park, where the street food festival had turned the pathways into a vibrant maze of colorful stalls and neon signs. The smell of grilled meats, sugar-coated churros, and fried dumplings filled the cool autumn air. Sarah stood at the entrance, fully committed to her role. Today's armor was a pink and purple striped jumpsuit she'd found for $6 at the thrift shop, layered under a bright yellow raincoat with giant plastic buttons. Her green eyeshadow gleamed under the park lights, and she wore a straw hat decorated with neon flowers. 3 necklaces jingled with every breath. If this didn't make him retreat, nothing would. She spotted him near a taco stand. Casual this time. No suit, just a simple pale blue shirt tucked into dark jeans. Still perfect, still infuriating. And then he smiled when he saw her. A real, genuine smile. Wow. His voice was warm with amusement. You've truly outdone yourself. You look like a flamingo who attended Coachella. Sarah crossed her arms and feigned offense. It's called European street fashion. You wouldn't understand. It's avant-garde. He chuckled softly. Clearly, I'm too old-fashioned to appreciate such genius. They walked through the festival together, the glow of string lights reflecting in his dark eyes. Sarah kept up her performance. She made absurd observations about the food stalls, claiming she could talk to hot dogs and that she once serenaded a grilled fish to thank it for its sacrifice. And yet, he never flinched, never pulled away. He kept smiling, listening, laughing with her. Every time she thought she was driving him off, he only leaned in closer. You're impossible, William finally said as they sat on a bench near the lake, each holding a Nutella-stuffed crepe. Now you're getting it, she replied proudly. He bit into his crepe, watching her over the rim of the pastry. Why are you really doing this, Sarah? She nearly choked. Doing what? His act. His voice was quiet now, not mocking, just curious. The disguises, the stories, the layers you keep stacking between us. Sarah blinked, caught off guard by the way he said us. She forced a grin. Maybe I just like a good challenge, and maybe I'm curious how much you can actually handle. His eyes held hers. And if I told you I'm enjoying this more with every minute, then I'd say your taste is questionable. His voice softened even more. I've always preferred what's unexpected. The weight of his gaze made her chest tighten. For a moment she forgot her ridiculous outfit, forgot her plan. It was just them. 2 people who shouldn't have crossed paths but somehow had. And that terrified her. When Sarah got home that night, Helena was waiting on the couch, wide-eyed. So, did he run screaming yet? Sarah collapsed onto the cushions, covering her face. No, he didn't. Helena blinked. He didn't? In fact, he asked for a 3rd date. Helena's jaw dropped. You're kidding. I wish I was. Helena's voice lowered. Sarah, are you sure you even want to win this bet anymore? Sarah stiffened. Of course I do. It's $5,000 0 cents, Helena. That's 2 months of rent, my mom's next appointment, groceries. Helena studied her carefully. You keep saying that, but you're trying awfully hard. Sarah looked down at her lap, twisting the hem of her jumpsuit. He's just not what I expected. I keep trying to push him away, and instead he listens, he watches, and when he looks at me, her voice trailed off. When he looks at you, Helena prompted gently. Sarah whispered, it's like he sees something I don't even see in myself. The 3rd date approached like a storm Sarah couldn't stop. This time she chose a small cafe in Greenwich Village. No grand festival, no distractions. She wanted to test him in a place stripped of spectacle, to see if he would finally break. The outfit? Even more absurd than before. An orange vintage dress with blue polka dots, striped socks, and 2 mismatched shoes. Her eyeliner was deliberately uneven, her lipstick clashing horribly. She arrived early, sipping a too-sweet cappuccino, her hands trembling slightly. Then, right on time, William walked through the door. He paused for a moment, taking her in, and smiled again. You managed to outdo even the last 2, he said, taking her hand and kissing it dramatically. Picasso would be jealous. Sarah forced a laugh. Picasso painted weird cubes. I'm more of a drunk Monet. Their coffees arrived. The waitress glanced curiously at Sarah, but said nothing. For a while, they fell into easy conversation. William asking about her invented childhood in the Patagonian desert, her imaginary expertise in training pigeons, her non-existent underground whistling career. But then something shifted. A tall blonde woman approached their table, every inch polished and perfect. "William," she said smoothly, "what a surprise." Sarah's heart sank. "Victoria?" "Of course." "The ex." William stood politely. "Victoria, this is Sarah." Victoria's eyes swept over Sarah like a blade. "So, you're the artist everyone's been talking about." Sarah smiled tightly. "Artist is generous. I prefer public disturbance." Victoria laughed, but her tone dripped venom. "Interesting." The air thickened as Victoria leaned in, her voice lowering. "You know, William has always had peculiar tastes. But this is truly different." Sarah felt her face flush. She clenched her fists under the table. "Victoria," William warned softly. "Oh, I'm just making conversation," Victoria purred. "It's rare to see you with someone so authentic." Sarah bit her tongue, but inside something cracked. For the first time since this charade began, she wasn't sure who was really playing whom. And somewhere, beneath the heavy makeup and ridiculous clothes, a quiet voice whispered inside her. What happens when you stop pretending? Chapter 2. The Second Date. Eccentric Disaster. The sun dipped low behind the Manhattan skyline, as Sarah stood before the full-length mirror, eyeing her creation with a mixture of dread and determination. "This," Helena declared dramatically from the doorway, "is the most spectacular disaster you've ever designed." Sarah turned slightly, the pink and purple striped jumpsuit clashing violently with the bright yellow rain boots. 3 layers of beaded necklaces jingled with every movement, and the oversized straw hat, decorated with neon plastic flowers, threatened to slide off her head. "Perfect," Sarah whispered, more to herself than anyone. "If this doesn't drive him away, nothing will." Helena tilted her head. "Are you sure you want to win this, Sarah? Because I gotta say, you're putting a lot of heart into scaring him off." Sarah's chest tightened for a moment. She smoothed the stiff fabric of the jumpsuit and forced a small laugh. "It's $5,000, Helena. You know what that means." "I do," Helena said softly. "But I also know that you've never tried this hard for anything that wasn't important." Sarah didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed her tiny rainbow purse and headed for the door. The street food festival at Central Park was buzzing with life. Lanterns swung gently from strings above, casting warm amber light across the hundreds of people wandering between stalls. Laughter floated through the air, mingled with the scent of sizzling meats, roasted corn, and sweet fried dough. As Sarah made her way through the crowd, she spotted him instantly. William stood near a taco stand, dressed far more casually than before. Navy jeans, a pale blue dress shirt, the sleeves rolled up just enough to reveal strong, tanned forearms. He looked like he belonged in a magazine spread, handsome without even trying. And when his eyes landed on her, his face lit up. Not with amusement, not with mockery, but with genuine delight. Sarah's stomach flipped involuntarily. He strolled toward her, hands in his pockets, his smile widening as he took in every absurd detail of her outfit. "Wow," he said, his voice low and warm. "You've truly outdone yourself." "You don't approve of European street fashion?" she asked, arching a painted green eyebrow. "Oh no," he replied, eyes twinkling. "Clearly I'm behind the times. I had no idea flamingo hiking in the rainforest was trending this year." Sarah laughed despite herself, and that made her angry. She was supposed to be off-putting, not entertained. "Don't mock my creativity," she warned, lifting her chin. "You wouldn't understand the complexities of modern street couture." He stepped closer, his smile softening. "You're right, I wouldn't. But I admire the boldness." They began to wander through the stalls, weaving between couples, families, and groups of friends. The aroma of grilled sausages, curry, and caramel popcorn hung heavy in the air. Sarah forced herself to stay in character. "You know," she said, eyeing a food stand with bright pink cotton candy, "I always talk to my food before eating it, to thank it for its noble sacrifice." William didn't blink. "A noble tradition. I assume your sushi appreciates your gratitude?" "Absolutely," she deadpanned, "though I think my omelets secretly resent me." He chuckled, the sound low and genuine. The longer they walked, the more Sarah noticed the odd comfort between them. Every bizarre statement she threw his way was met not with discomfort or ridicule, but with curiosity. He wasn't playing defense, he was engaging. "Hot dogs," Sarah declared, stopping at a vendor. "I always feel bad for hot dogs." "Why?" William asked, hands tucked behind his back. "Because they're never presented properly, always shoved into cheap buns. They probably have deep inferiority complexes." William bit his lip, trying not to laugh. "We should start a support group for underappreciated street food." "Hot Dogs Anonymous," she agreed. "Step 1, admit you deserve better condiments." That did it, William laughed aloud, a rich sound that made nearby heads turn. Sarah felt her own smile blooming before she could stop it. As they reached a crepe stand, Sarah ordered one with Nutella, banana, and extra marshmallows, just to keep up appearances. William simply mirrored her order, unfazed. They found a quiet bench near the small lake, the moon reflecting off the water like shattered silver. Sarah took a bite of her crepe, chewing slowly. She caught William watching her again. "What a been?" she asked. He leaned back, his tone softer now. "You fascinate me." She rolled her eyes. "You have terrible taste." "I've been told that before." For a moment, the playful tension dropped. The quiet buzz of the crowd faded into the background. "Why are you really doing this, Sarah?" he asked, voice lower than before. "The disguises, the outrageous outfits, the jokes?" She blinked, caught off guard by the way her name sounded from his lips, like he'd known it far longer than these few meetings. "I already told you," she said lightly. "I like a challenge. And I like honesty." That landed hard. Her defenses snapped back up. "You're fishing for something that isn't there." "Am I?" he asked gently. "Because I think there's a lot you're not saying." She looked away toward the lake, heart thudding uncomfortably. For a moment she thought about telling him the truth. About the bakery shifts, the cafe nights, her mother's fragile health. But she couldn't. Not yet. Instead, she deflected with humor. "Do you know ducks have regional accents?" He blinked. "Pardon?" She pointed to a small flock gliding across the lake. "It's true. Depending on where they're raised, they quack differently." William studied her for a beat and smiled. "You're full of surprises." After a long moment of silence, he spoke again. "What if I told you I'm enjoying this far more than I ever expected?" She tried to stay unfazed. "I'd say you have strange hobbies." "I do." His gaze met hers fully now. "But I also know when I've found something rare." Sarah's breath hitched. The way he looked at her, as though he wasn't seeing the hat or the makeup or the ridiculous jumpsuit, made her feel more vulnerable than she had expected. She stood suddenly, trying to shake it off. "Want to check out the street performers?" "Of course." They walked toward a circle of jazz musicians near the fountain. The upbeat rhythm filled the air, inviting nearby couples to sway along. Without warning, Sarah started to dance, horribly, deliberately awkward. "This," she announced proudly, "is the traditional dance of my people. We call it the awkward flamingo shuffle." William laughed. "Well, allow me to join the tribe." And to her astonishment, he actually danced, badly, on purpose, completely unbothered by the glances of strangers. "You dance worse than I do," Sarah teased. "Impossible," he replied with mock seriousness. "You said you belong to the people who can't dance. At least you have an excuse." Sarah's laughter echoed into the night air. She couldn't remember the last time she had laughed this freely. As the song ended, they clapped politely along with the small crowd, both breathless. They strolled quietly toward the park exit. When they reached the stone archway near the street, William turned to her. "For the third date," he said, "you choose the place. Anywhere you want. Tomorrow night." Sarah frowned. "Why the rush?" "Because I'm curious," he hesitated, his voice dropping just enough to sound unguarded. "And because I enjoy this game far more than I should." Her heart pounded again. "I'll think about it," she said, trying to keep her composure. "Good," he smiled softly. "But Sarah..." "Yes?" "Thank you for tonight. It's been a long time since I've had this much fun." Later, as the taxi carried her home, Sarah leaned her forehead against the cool window. Her original plan, to drive him away, was failing spectacularly. Worse than that, she was starting to want him not to leave. And that terrified her far more than any costume she could ever wear. Chapter 3. Cracks in the disguise. The next evening came too fast. Sarah stood outside a tiny cafe tucked into a quiet corner of Greenwich Village. Soft amber light glowed from inside, casting cozy reflections on the rain-speckled windows. The weather had turned cooler, but Sarah's pulse kept her flushed and warm beneath her ridiculous outfit. This time, she'd gone for a more artistically offensive look. An orange vintage dress covered in blue polka dots, mismatched striped socks, and two completely different shoes. The left one had a sunflower embroidered onto the toe. The right had a small, glittering bow. Her hair was tied in two uneven braids, and her green eyeshadow gleamed under the street lamp. If William didn't give up after tonight, she had no idea what else to try. She checked her watch, 6:55 p.m. Right on cue, the cafe's bell jingled. William entered, sharp as ever. A simple white button-down, sleeves casually rolled, no tie. The top button undone. Effortlessly elegant. Effortlessly him. The contrast between them was comical, but when his gaze found her, there was no hesitation. Only that faint, familiar smile. "You've managed it again," he said softly, crossing the cafe and kissing her hand with exaggerated formality. "Picasso would call you his masterpiece." "Picasso painted cubes," Sarah replied, sitting as he pulled her chair out. "I'm going for more of a drunken Monet vibe. Consider it achieved." The waitress arrived, blinking at Sarah's ensemble but saying nothing. William ordered a slice of apple pie and 2 cappuccinos. Sarah added vanilla syrup and 3 sugar cubes to hers. Another deliberate choice, as if to test how far she could push him. "Gotta keep my eccentric energy up," she joked. William watched her pour in the sugar, his gaze as steady as ever. "You're very good at this, you know." "At what?" "At pretending." For a brief moment, her hands froze around the cup. But before she could reply, the door chimed again. And that's when the evening twisted. A woman stepped into the cafe, tall and elegant in a designer winter coat, blonde hair perfectly styled into soft waves. Even from a distance, her aura screamed wealth and precision. Sarah recognized her immediately, even before she reached the table. Victoria Ashworth, William's ex, the woman from the restaurant. "William," Victoria greeted smoothly, her lips curving into something that resembled a smile but didn't quite reach her eyes. "What a surprise to see you here." William straightened but remained calm. "Victoria." Victoria's eyes slid toward Sarah, and this time her smile sharpened. "And this must be the artist I've heard so much about." Before Sarah could say anything, Victoria extended her manicured hand like she was offering an olive branch. Or a knife. "Victoria Ashworth," she purred. Sarah shook her hand, keeping her voice light. "Sarah Martina." Victoria's lips twitched. "So, you're the one who's captivated him." "It's mutual, I assure you," Sarah said, matching her tone with practiced ease. "Turns out, I have a gift for surprise." "Ooh, I can see that." Victoria's eyes swept over Sarah's outfit. "Very expressive." Sarah kept her smile intact, but she could feel William watching the exchange, tense beneath his calm exterior. "How long have you two known each other?" Victoria asked, voice syrupy sweet. William answered before Sarah could. "A few weeks." "Ah, a whirlwind," Victoria remarked. "William has always had interesting tastes. I remember when he went through that phase of collecting street art. That lasted about a month." Sarah's hands clenched slightly under the table. The jab wasn't subtle. "Do you enjoy art, Victoria?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice airy. "Real art," Victoria replied, her tone tightening. "The kind that holds its value." "That's funny," Sarah said lightly. "I thought love worked the same way. It only holds its value if it's real." The edge behind Sarah's words cut sharper than she intended. For a moment, Victoria's smile slipped, but only for a moment. "Well," Victoria finally said, stepping back. "It was lovely meeting you." Her gaze flicked toward William as she added, "I'm sure we'll talk again soon." She walked away, leaving behind the faintest trace of expensive perfume and tension that clung like smoke. The silence that followed was heavy. Sarah exhaled and forced a nervous laugh. "Well, that was fun." William's jaw flexed slightly. "She shouldn't have come." "She knows about me, doesn't she?" Sarah asked softly. "About who I really am?" William hesitated. "Victoria has ways of finding things out." Sarah swallowed hard. "And you? How much do you know?" William's eyes darkened as he finally leaned in, his voice quiet, but firm. "I know you work 3 part-time jobs. I know you're putting yourself through culinary school while taking care of your mother. I know you sell homemade sweets in Washington Square on weekends. And I know," he paused, "that you were never supposed to be on that first date. That wasn't your blind date. It was Helena's." Sarah's breath caught. Her throat tightened. He knew. All of it. The blood drained from her face as her defenses threatened to shatter. "You," she started, her voice cracking. "You've been investigating me?" "I didn't need to investigate you," William said softly. "I noticed you long before that dinner, Sarah." Her head spun. "What are you talking about?" His gaze never wavered. 2 months ago, Washington Square Park, I saw you there, selling your brigadeiros to a little girl who didn't have enough money. You gave her candy for free and made up some story about how it had magical powers to chase away nightmares." Sarah blinked, heart hammering. She remembered that day, vaguely. But she never saw him. "You were there?" "I was supposed to meet someone for business. I saw you before you ever saw me." His voice softened further. "I've been watching you long before you ever wore the orange glasses." Sarah's breath caught again, this time for a different reason. "You," her voice trembled, not sure whether to feel exposed or something dangerously close to flattered. "You've been watching me?" "I saw a woman who smiled even when she looked exhausted, who made strangers laugh, who gave, even when she had little." His voice thickened slightly. "That's the woman who caught my attention." She could barely breathe. "Why didn't you say anything sooner?" she whispered. "Because you were free then," William admitted quietly. "You looked happy. I didn't want to intrude on that. But when Helena's setup happened and you showed up pretending to be someone you're not, I couldn't help but be curious." Sarah's throat tightened, her eyes burning. Her walls, those carefully built layers of awkwardness and sarcasm, were cracking. "I don't know what to say." William's eyes held hers, gentle but steady. "Then don't say anything." The waitress arrived with their pies, but neither of them touched the plates. Instead, they sat there, 2 strangers who weren't strangers at all, tangled somewhere between honesty and fear. Finally, Sarah whispered, "You really want to keep going, don't you? Even after all this?" William didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Why?" Her voice broke. "Why me?" "Because you make me feel alive." His answer was almost too quiet. "Because you don't want anything from me, except for me to leave you alone. And that's exactly why I can't." The air between them grew heavy again. Sarah's eyes burned as tears threatened to rise. She stood suddenly. "I need some air." William stood too, concerned. "Sarah, she waved a shaky hand. "I need a minute." She stepped outside into the cool night, drawing in sharp breaths, her heart pounding violently against her ribs. Her disguise was falling apart. Worse, her heart was starting to slip right through it. Chapter 4. The Confrontation. The air outside the cafe was sharp and cool as Sarah leaned against the brick wall, closing her eyes and willing her pulse to slow down. Everything was unraveling. This had started as a silly bet, a ridiculous plan, a way to earn enough to help her mother, to buy a little time. But now it felt like she was standing on the edge of something far more dangerous. Not because William was cruel or calculating, but because he was starting to matter. And worse, because she wanted him to matter. The door creaked softly behind her. She didn't need to open her eyes to know it was him. "Are you okay?" William's voice was quiet, careful. Sarah kept her eyes closed for a moment longer. "You followed me." "Of course I did." The softness in his tone made her throat tighten. "Why?" she whispered. Because you're running from something that isn't there, he said gently. From me. She finally opened her eyes and looked at him. The streetlight above them cast a faint glow across his face. His features looked softer in this light, less like the intimidating CEO and more like a man who was trying. But it didn't make it easier. You knew who I was all along, she said, her voice brittle. You saw me at the park. You knew I wasn't Helena. You knew everything. Yes. Her breath caught again. There was no hesitation in his answer, no denial. Then why pretend, she whispered. Why let me go on with this stupid game? Why the bet? Why? Because I wanted to know who you were when you thought no one was watching, he interrupted softly. And because I couldn't stay away. The words wrapped around her like a dangerous kind of comfort. She shook her head, trying to clear it. You say that like it's noble, Sarah snapped, her voice cracking under the weight of rising emotion. But it's not. It's manipulation. His expression didn't falter. I never wanted to manipulate you, Sarah. She let out a bitter laugh. Really? You followed me. You learned about my mother, my jobs, my school. You know more about my life than most people I actually trust. I did it because I cared, William said quietly. Cared? She repeated, her voice rising. You cared? You don't even know me. I know enough. Do you? She shot back. You see some girl handing out candy in the park and suddenly you decide you're fascinated, like I'm some project you can fix? Some refreshing change from all your polished socialites? Her words came out sharper than she intended, but she couldn't stop. The dam had cracked. Everything was spilling out now. All the exhaustion, all the fear, all the things she hadn't allowed herself to feel since the first night. William's voice was steady, but low. You're not a project. Then what am I? She demanded. A bet? A charity case? A temporary amusement? Because that's sure what it feels like. His jaw clenched as he took a careful breath. You're none of those things. She laughed again, but it sounded more like a sob. You have no idea what it's like for someone like me, William. I don't have safety nets. I don't have billions of dollars to fall back on if I mess up. My mom's one medical bill away from disaster. I work until my hands hurt, I study until I fall asleep sitting up, and I still wake up every day terrified that it won't be enough. William stepped forward, his voice lower now, more urgent. I do know. She shook her head. No, you don't. My family didn't always have money, Sarah. The confession startled her. She blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. William continued, his voice tight. I built my company from nothing. I was raised by my grandmother after my parents died. We had nothing but each other. I've scraped and clawed for everything I have, and yes, his voice softened, almost breaking. I know what it feels like to be scared that no matter how hard you work, you might still lose everything. The quiet hung thick between them. Sarah's chest ached as she stared at him. The arrogance she thought she saw in him before wasn't arrogance at all. It was armor, like hers, just worn differently. But you're not scared anymore, she whispered. You won. William's eyes locked on hers. Not when it comes to business. But with you, Sarah? His voice softened into something dangerously sincere. With you, I'm terrified. She swallowed, her throat burning. Terrified of what? Of losing you before I ever get the chance to really have you. Her breath hitched. The world around them faded, the distant hum of city traffic, the flicker of neon signs, the soft rain still misting the streets. There was only him. And her, and the fragile space between them. She looked away first, fighting the sting behind her eyes. I'm still not sure I trust you. William nodded, stepping back slightly, respecting her distance. I don't expect you to, not yet. Then why keep trying? Because for the first time in a long time, he said softly, I met someone who doesn't want anything from me except for me to leave them alone. And that's exactly why I can't. Her lips trembled. He exhaled slowly, watching her. You make me feel something I forgot I could feel. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, overwhelmed. Then finally her voice came out smaller than she intended. "I need time." William nodded. "Take all the time you need." They stood there for a long moment, not touching, but not entirely separate either. And then Sarah turned, stepping away from him and into the night. The taxi ride home was a blur of city lights and raindrops on glass. Sarah stared out the window, hugging herself tightly as the ache inside her chest expanded. She wasn't just afraid of him anymore. She was afraid of herself. Because somewhere between the bargain, the ridiculous disguises, and his stubborn refusal to walk away, she had started to hope. And hope, more than anything, was what scared her most. Chapter 5. The Invitation. The apartment was unusually quiet that morning. Sarah sat at the tiny kitchen table, staring at the cream-colored envelope resting in front of her. Its thick, elegant paper was too heavy for ordinary mail. Her name was written across the front in careful script, not typed, not printed, but handwritten. She ran her finger across it, her stomach twisting. She hadn't seen William since that night outside the cafe. She hadn't answered his texts, she hadn't called. Every time her phone lit up with his name, she let it ring until the screen went dark again. The bet was falling apart. No, not the bet, she was. When the knock on her door had come earlier that morning, she thought maybe it would be Helena dropping by for one of their lectures about self-sabotage. Instead, it had been a delivery man, holding out this envelope like it weighed nothing, though to Sarah, it felt heavier than stone. She finally peeled it open. Inside was an invitation, thick cardstock, gold trim, the kind of thing you only see in movies. A charity auction at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Black tie. Saturday night. Her breath hitched as her eyes dropped to the handwritten note tucked behind it. "Sarah, I know you have every reason to be angry with me. This event supports a cause I think matters to you. Free medical care for low-income families. If you don't want to see me, I understand. But if you do, I'll be there. No disguises necessary. William, I'm hoping you'll say yes." Sarah swallowed hard, closing her eyes. Of course he would find a way to target the one thing that would weaken her defenses. He knew her mother's hospital bills were crushing her. He knew the pressure she was under. And he also knew, perhaps better than anyone, that her heart would bend long before her pride would. The charity was real. The cause mattered. And yet, was it just another play? Her chest tightened as doubt tangled with something far worse. Hope. An hour later, Helena arrived with her usual dramatic flair. "You got the invitation, didn't you?" she said, before Sarah even opened the door. Sarah held up the envelope silently. Helena sighed as she stepped inside. "And you're sitting here, paralyzed, like you didn't see this coming. I don't know what to do." "Yes, you do." Helena crossed her arms. "You're going?" Sarah blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Helena said, her voice soft but firm. "Sarah, this isn't just about William. This is about you." Sarah looked down, her voice shaking. "But what if it's all a game? What if I walk into that museum and he's still just studying me?" Helena lowered her voice, sitting across from her. "And what if he's not?" Sarah stayed quiet. "You're scared because this is real now," Helena said gently. "And because you like him." Sarah's throat tightened. Helena's voice softened even more. "If you don't go, you'll regret it. Not because you owe him anything, but because you owe yourself the chance to find out." Saturday arrived too quickly. Sarah stood before the mirror, unable to recognize the woman staring back. For the first time since this all began, there were no disguises. No oversized glasses, no wild outfits, no neon accessories. Just her. Helena had shown up with a navy blue dress borrowed from a friend, simple, classic, and elegant. The neckline was modest, the fabric flowing gracefully to the floor. She wore her dark hair loose, soft curls framing her face. A single pair of small pearl earrings completed the look. "You look beautiful," her mother whispered from the doorway, wiping away a tear. Sarah tried to smile. "I feel like I'm impersonating someone else." "No," her mother said, stepping closer. "This is who you've always been. You just forgot for a while." Helena grinned from behind her veil. "Besides, no one can pull off orange glasses forever." The Metropolitan Museum was glowing beneath the city lights, grand and intimidating. A row of black cars lined the street. Paparazzi waited near the entrance, though Sarah managed to slip past most of them as guests arrived in glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos. Inside, the main hall had been transformed into something out of a dream. Soft, golden light glinted off the marble floors. Waiters glided between towering displays of flowers and tables of champagne. Classical music drifted from the live orchestra near the balcony. Sarah stood near one of the exhibit pieces, her breath catching as her nerves threatened to swallow her whole. And then she felt him. She didn't even have to turn. His presence behind her was calm but undeniable, like a gravity she couldn't ignore. "You came," William said quietly. She turned slowly. He wore a midnight black tuxedo, tailored to perfection, but his eyes, those were what struck her most. For all his calm, beneath the surface, they carried something raw, nervous, vulnerable. "I came for the cause," she said softly, managing to steady her voice. "Not for you." He nodded. "I know, but thank you anyway." They stood there, the silence stretching between them, full of everything neither knew how to say. "You look," he started, pausing, his voice suddenly softer. "You look beautiful." Sarah felt her cheeks flush. "You look normal." That made him smile. They turned together, pretending to admire the nearby abstract painting, though neither was really paying attention. Finally, William broke the quiet. "About the other night." "I don't want to talk about it," Sarah cut in gently. "Not here." He nodded, accepting it. "Would you let me at least show you around?" he asked, offering his arm. No expectations, no pressure. She hesitated only for a moment before slipping her hand into the crook of his elbow. "Only if you promise not to try to impress me with fancy art talk." "I solemnly swear," he smiled. "Tonight, I'm just your clueless tour guide." They walked through the grand galleries, surrounded by priceless art that neither of them could pretend to fully understand. And for the first time in weeks, something loosened in Sarah's chest. His presence was steady but careful, like he didn't want to crowd her. When they reached a painting bursting with color and wild brushstrokes, William stopped. "This one," he said, "reminds me of you." She tilted her head. "Because it's chaotic?" "Because it's alive," he said softly. "Because you see layers in it no one else sees. And because it makes people stop and look twice." Sarah's throat thickened. She swallowed. "Why did you really make that bet, William?" she asked finally. He exhaled. "Honestly, because you were the first person in years who didn't want anything from me. You were literally doing everything you could to get rid of me. That was refreshing." Sarah let out a breathless, shaky laugh. "At first it was just curiosity," he continued, his voice more vulnerable than she'd ever heard. "But very quickly, it became more." Before she could respond, soft music began to play again. A few couples had moved onto the open floor near the grand staircase. William looked at her carefully. "Would you dance with me?" he asked. Sarah stiffened, hesitating. "I don't really know how." "Neither do I." His lips curved into a soft, nervous smile. "We can pretend we do." She bit her lip, her heart pounded, and for once she allowed herself to stop thinking. "Come dance," she whispered. He led her onto the floor, his hand settling gently at her waist, the other taking her hand as though she was made of something breakable. The music wrapped around them, soft and slow, as they swayed awkwardly at first, then gradually finding a rhythm. Sarah felt her head resting lightly against his chest, hearing his heartbeat as steady as her own. Neither spoke. Neither needed to. For that moment, it was real. All of it. The pretending had faded. And all that remained was something terrifyingly simple. The truth. Chapter 6. The Real Proposal. A Dangerous Agreement. The city glimmered beneath the night sky as Sarah rode home in the back of the taxi, her fingers still trembling slightly from the warmth of William's hand. It was one thing to pretend, to push him away with ridiculous outfits and outlandish behavior. But tonight, she hadn't been pretending at all. She hadn't worn a costume. She hadn't made a joke. She had let him see her. And somehow that was far more terrifying than any mask she'd worn before. Her phone buzzed. A message from William. "Thank you for the dance. You looked beautiful tonight. No disguises necessary. WT." Sarah read the message several times before finally deleting it, but not before smiling. The next morning, the call came. "Miss Martinez?" The voice on the other end was polite, formal. "My name is James Parker. I'm Mr. William Scott's personal assistant. He'd like to schedule a private meeting with you this afternoon." Sarah frowned. "Why isn't he calling me directly?" "Mr. Scott has back-to-back meetings, but asked me to prioritize this request. He said it's important." Her stomach tightened. "Where?" "At his office, 5:00 p.m. She hesitated for a long moment. Part of her wanted to say no, to keep her distance before her heart tangled itself any further. But curiosity, and something else she didn't want to name, pulled her forward. "All right," she whispered. "I'll be there." William's office tower rose like a monument of glass and steel against the Manhattan skyline. Sarah had never felt smaller than she did standing in the marble lobby, waiting for the elevator. Everything about this place radiated a kind of power that didn't belong to her world. She glanced down at her simple blouse and slacks. No disguises, no outrageous colors, just herself. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. James Parker greeted her at the 30th floor, his professional smile never wavering. "Right this way, Miss Martinez." The conference room was sleek and spotless, a panoramic view of the city stretching behind tall windows. The table was long enough to seat 20 people, but William was seated alone at one end, his suit as crisp as ever. When he saw her, his face shifted into something softer. "Thank you for coming." Sarah sat slowly, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "You said it was important." He exhaled. "It is." There was a beat of silence between them, charged. "I have a proposal," William finally said. Sarah's heart gave a nervous flutter. "Another bet?" "Not this time." He shook his head. "Something much bigger." He looked at her carefully, almost searching her face for any sign of panic. "My grandmother is sick." Sarah's breath caught. "She raised me after my parents died," William said quietly, his voice rawer than she'd ever heard it. "She's my only family. And the doctors say she doesn't have much time." The weight of his words settled heavy in the air. "She's always had one wish," he continued, "to see me married before she dies." Sarah's pulse quickened. "What are you saying?" "She's coming to stay with me for a week. I need someone to pretend to be my fiancé." The words hit like a slap. Sarah stared at him, wide-eyed. "You're joking." "I'm not." "You want me to—" She struggled for breath. "Pretend to be your fiancé? For your dying grandmother?" "Yes." Her voice grew sharp. "Are you insane, William?" "I know how it sounds." "No, I don't think you do." Sarah stood abruptly, pacing. "You don't need a fake fiancé, you need therapy." He stayed seated, patient but unwavering. "I've thought about this carefully." "Oh, well, that makes it better," she snapped. "It's 1 week," William said, voice steady. 7 days. You'd stay at my home, attend a few events. Help make my grandmother believe I've finally found someone." Sarah turned, her heart pounding. "And then what? What happens after the week?" "We go back to our lives." Sarah studied him for a long, hard moment. "Why me?" William's answer was immediate. "Because my grandmother will see through anyone else. But you? You're real. You're exactly the kind of woman she's always hoped I'd fall for." Her breath caught in her throat. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I'm not your world," she said, her voice cracking. "I don't belong in mansions or charity galas or corporate empires. I sell candy on the street, William." He stood now, his voice suddenly softer. "That's exactly why I'm asking you." The sincerity in his eyes made her stomach twist. "And there's compensation," he added carefully. $50,000. Sarah felt like the ground tilted under her. 50,000, she repeated in disbelief. "It would be yours after the week is complete, no strings attached." Her head spun. $50,000. Enough to finally cover her mother's medical treatments. Enough to buy time, to breathe. It was so much money, and yet, "This is crazy," she whispered. William's gaze held hers. "I know." She stepped back, her voice shaking. "What if your grandmother finds out? What if your family—" We'll do our best to make it believable. I've already prepared a simple backstory that's close to the truth. We met in Washington Square. You were selling sweets. We fell in love." Sarah let out a nervous, breathless laugh. "That's closer to the truth than I want to admit." William allowed himself the faintest smile. Sarah shook her head again. "I need time." "Take all the time you need." That night, Sarah sat curled on Helena's couch, her head spinning. Helena listened quietly as Sarah laid everything out: the offer, the money, the risk, the growing feelings she was afraid to name. When Sarah finished, Helena let out a low whistle. 50 grand. "I know." Helena studied her closely. "You're scared." Sarah's eyes stung. "I'm terrified." "Of the money or of him?" Sarah's voice broke. "Both." Helena leaned forward, her voice gentle. "You like him." Sarah's walls crumbled. "I do, and that's the problem." Helena took her hand. "Then say yes, but this time, don't wear the masks. If you're going to pretend to be his fiancé, be yourself." Sarah blinked away tears. "What if everything goes wrong?" Helena smiled softly. "What if everything goes right?" The next morning, Sarah picked up her phone with trembling fingers and dialed William's number. He answered on the first ring. "Sarah?" "I'll do it," she whispered. There was a pause. Then, "Thank you. But on one condition," she added. "No pretending between us. If we're going to fool your grandmother, we actually have to get to know each other." "Deal," William said immediately. "When can you start?" "This afternoon." He exhaled, his voice lighter now. "I'll send a car." She hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "William?" "Yes. If you're lying about any of this, your grandmother, your reasons, I'll walk away the moment I find out." His answer was quiet but steady. "Understood." As Sarah packed a small suitcase that afternoon, her stomach fluttered with equal parts fear and anticipation. She was walking into his world now, a world of wealth, lies, and impossible risk. But somewhere deep inside, under all the noise, hope was beginning to bloom. And that terrified her more than anything. Chapter 7: Meeting Grandma Eleanor. The mansion stood like a silent guardian on the Upper East Side, its towering stone facade bathed in soft afternoon light. Massive windows glinted like polished mirrors, reflecting a life Sarah had only seen from a distance. As the black car pulled up, Sarah gripped her suitcase tightly, her stomach coiling tighter with every breath. The front door swung open before she could knock. William stood there. He wasn't in his usual sharp suit today. Instead, he wore a light blue dress shirt, sleeves casually rolled up, khaki pants, and, most surprising of all, a nervous smile. "You came," he said softly. "I said I would," Sarah replied, swallowing the lump in her throat. He stepped aside, taking her bag as she crossed the marble threshold into his world. The house smelled faintly of fresh lilies and polished wood. Sunlight streamed through towering windows, illuminating grand staircases and gallery walls filled with expensive art. Everything about the mansion whispered money. Old money. Quiet money. The kind of money that didn't shout. It simply existed. Sarah felt painfully out of place. "Let me show you your room," William said, leading her upstairs. The bedroom he opened was larger than her entire apartment. A king-sized bed sat beneath high ceilings, soft blue curtains framing massive windows that overlooked a manicured courtyard and stone fountain. "There's a private bathroom," William said gently, sensing her unease. "And full privacy whenever you need it." Sarah nodded, trying to steady her breathing. "It's beautiful." He turned toward her. "She arrives tomorrow morning." His voice lowered, losing a bit of its steady CEO tone. "I want you to feel comfortable, Sarah. If at any point this becomes too much, you only have to say the word." She met his gaze. "You promised me honesty, William. I'm trusting you." He nodded once, his voice softer now. "And I won't break that." Dinner that evening felt like something from a different life. The dining room stretched endlessly, lit by a chandelier that sparkled like a frozen waterfall above them. A private chef had prepared roasted salmon, truffled potatoes, and fresh garden vegetables. Sarah sat stiffly across from William, aware of every movement, every breath, every glance. William, surprisingly, wasn't the polished CEO tonight. He was something softer, more careful. He asked about her mother, about her schooling, about her dreams for the bakery she one day hoped to open. And for the first time, Sarah found herself answering without her usual sarcasm or deflection. "My mom taught me how to make sweets when I was little," she admitted. "She used to say that sugar couldn't fix life, but it could give people a reason to smile for 5 minutes. That always felt like enough." William smiled softly. "She sounds like a very wise woman." Sarah lowered her gaze. "She is." For a long moment, the conversation simply paused. Not awkward, just quiet. Like both were adjusting to this strange, delicate bridge they were now walking across. Then Sarah, her voice tentative, asked, "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Why haven't you ever married? I mean," she stumbled, immediately feeling awkward. "You're successful, handsome, kind, at least when you're not being infuriating." He smiled faintly, "Because I've never met someone who wanted me, only for what I represent." His eyes locked on hers, until now. Sarah's throat tightened. Before she could respond, a voice interrupted from behind. "Mr. Scott, Ms. Ashworth has arrived." The housekeeper's words hit the air like a cold gust. William exhaled slowly. "Let her in." Victoria Ashworth entered like a storm wrapped in silk. Her black designer dress hugged every perfect line of her body, her blonde hair perfectly styled. She didn't even glance at Sarah at first, her eyes fixed entirely on William. "William, darling," she purred, brushing his cheek with a kiss that hovered a little too long. "Victoria," William replied, calm but firm. Finally, Victoria turned to Sarah, her smile dripping with venom disguised as politeness. "And this must be the mysterious fiancé I've heard so much about." Sarah forced a polite smile. "That's right, Sarah." Victoria's eyes swept over her simple navy dress, as though mentally calculating every dollar it cost, and finding the total unsatisfactory. "You're even simpler than I imagined." Sarah's smile didn't falter. "Simple is honest. I find it refreshing." The jab landed, and Victoria's expression twitched before quickly recovering. "Well," she said sweetly, "I do hope you'll enjoy your stay in William's world." Victoria turned back to William, dropping her voice just enough for Sarah to still hear. "If you ever want to talk privately, I'm always here, for old time's sake." "I'm sure that won't be necessary," William said, his voice cool but civil. Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly at his tone before she finally took her leave, her heels clicking sharply across the marble floor. When the door closed behind her, Sarah exhaled. "That woman," she muttered. "It's not your concern." William finished gently. "She doesn't matter." Sarah bit her lip. "You know she's going to stir trouble." William nodded. "Let her try." For the first time since she arrived, Sarah saw something else flicker in William's gaze. Protection, not possession, not control. Something far warmer. The following morning, Sarah stood nervously at the grand front entrance as the black sedan pulled up. Eleanor Scott stepped out before the driver could open her door, holding a small leather suitcase in one hand and waving off any attempt at assistance. She was smaller than Sarah expected, but sharp-eyed and upright, her silver hair neatly pulled into a bun. Her coat was simple but expensive, her entire presence radiating the kind of quiet authority only life experience could grant. William stepped forward. "Grandma, you should have let the driver—" "Nonsense." Her voice was gravelly but warm. "My legs still work, for now." Then her eyes landed on Sarah. "So," Eleanor said, taking a slow step forward, studying her carefully, "you must be the girl who finally tamed my impossible grandson." Sarah forced a polite smile, reaching out her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Scott." Eleanor ignored the handshake entirely and pulled Sarah into a brief but firm hug. "Mrs. Scott is too stiff. You can call me Grandma Eleanor." Sarah blinked, surprised by the unexpected warmth. Eleanor stepped back, giving her a full once-over. You're not what I imagined." Sarah's heart leapt. "I hope that's not a bad thing." "It's the best thing you could be," Eleanor replied, her sharp eyes glinting with something almost mischievous. "Come inside. I have questions." William shot Sarah a reassuring glance as Eleanor marched inside like a general returning home. Lunch was served in the smaller dining room, cozier, less intimidating. Eleanor didn't waste time on small talk. "So, Sarah," she began as she sliced into her salmon with surgical precision, "tell me about yourself. What does my grandson's future wife do?" Sarah cleared her throat. "I sell homemade sweets. Brigadeiros, mostly." Eleanor paused. "Ah, you cook." "Yes, ma'am." "Don't call me ma'am," Eleanor snapped playfully. "That makes me feel like a relic." Sarah smiled softly. "Yes, Grandma Eleanor." William watched quietly, a faint relieved smile on his face. Eleanor continued. "So, you didn't grow up with silver spoons like the women my grandson usually dates?" "No, I didn't," Sarah replied honestly. "My mother's a seamstress. My father passed away when I was 16. And yet, here you are." Sarah's voice stayed calm. "I've always believed in building my own life." Eleanor smiled for real this time. "Good answer." They moved on to family stories, childhood memories, even Sarah's first attempts at baking that resulted in rock-hard cookies. Eleanor listened with genuine interest, asking sharp but fair questions. By dessert, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. As they moved to the sitting room afterward, Eleanor surprised her. "You know," Eleanor said softly, lowering herself into her favorite chair, "I was worried William would end up alone. He hides behind his work. He's good at pretending he doesn't need anyone." She looked directly at Sarah now. "But I haven't seen him smile like this in years." Sarah swallowed, her chest tightening. "He's a good man." Eleanor's gaze softened. "So are you, dear." That evening, after Eleanor retired to her room, Sarah and William found themselves alone in the quiet living room. The fire crackled softly, a strange comfort settled between them. William spoke first, his voice low. "You handled her perfectly." Sarah let out a small laugh. "I felt like I was being interviewed for a position I didn't apply for." William smiled. "You passed." Sarah's gaze lingered on the flickering flames. "William," she said softly, "are you sure about this?" He turned fully toward her, his expression steady. "Yes." Her voice trembled. "Because the longer we pretend, the harder it will be when this ends." William's eyes darkened, not with anger, but something else entirely. "Sarah," he whispered, "what if I don't want it to end?" Chapter 8. The Family's Attack. The knock came earlier than expected. Sarah stood beside William at the grand entrance as the butler opened the towering doors. Outside, 3 sleek black cars sat lined up like soldiers. One by one, members of William's family stepped out, dressed not for a visit, but for war. Marcus Scott led the charge. He was tall, sharply dressed, and carried an air of cold calculation. His salt and pepper hair was slicked back, his face tight with forced smiles. Patricia, his wife, followed, thin, statuesque, with jewelry that glittered under the afternoon sun. Behind them came Aunt Helen and 2 other board members, faces Sarah only recognized from the business magazines that occasionally mentioned William's company. The moment Sarah saw their expressions, she understood. This wasn't a family visit. It was an ambush. "William," Marcus greeted with a nod that lacked any warmth. "We've heard surprising news." William stood tall, his voice calm. "You're welcome to come in." As they entered the sitting room, the air thickened. Eleanor was already seated in her favorite chair, watching the procession with narrowed eyes, her sharp gaze flicking between each guest as if silently preparing her own defense. Sarah sat beside William on the couch, forcing her hands to stay steady in her lap. She could feel their eyes landing on her one by one. "So," Patricia began, folding her long fingers across her lap. "You must be Sarah." Sarah smiled politely. "Yes." The politeness was a thin sheet of ice. Everyone here could feel how fragile it was. Marcus leaned forward. "You'll forgive us for being direct, but this engagement of yours, it's all happened rather suddenly." "It has," William answered simply. Patricia jumped in. "We have certain responsibilities to the company, William. The public image of our family and its leadership is not just personal. It affects our shareholders, investors, and decades of reputation." "And exactly how does my fiancé affect our shareholders, Patricia?" William asked with dangerous calm. Marcus smiled coolly. "Well, that depends on how well we understand her background." Patricia opened a small notebook, flipping through several pages. The sound of paper against her perfectly manicured nails was somehow more unnerving than shouting. "You're attending Manhattan Community College," Patricia began, "studying culinary arts. You work part-time at a bakery. You also sell handmade sweets out of a stand in Washington Square Park on weekends. And your mother, a widow, works as a seamstress." Sarah blinked. They knew everything. Patricia smiled, pretending to be sweet. "Have I missed anything?" "No," Sarah said softly. "That's all correct." "And your father?" Marcus asked. "He passed away when you were a teenager?" Sarah's voice stayed steady. "Yes." The room fell painfully silent for a moment. Then Aunt Helen cleared her throat. "And how exactly did you and William meet?" William answered before Sarah could. "We met in the park." Sarah's voice added gently. "He bought a box of brigadeiros from me." Aunt Helen's lips twitched slightly, as though amused. Patricia flipped another page. "So, William, this isn't exactly the kind of woman we imagined you would bring home." "And what kind of woman did you imagine?" William asked. Patricia smiled tightly. "Someone who comes from our world." Sarah stiffened but kept her voice even. "I may not come from your world, but that doesn't make me any less capable of loving him." Patricia's smile sharpened. "Love is very noble, dear, but love doesn't pay for boardroom mistakes." Marcus joined in. "Your background will raise questions, William. Questions from the board, from the media. This isn't just about who you choose to marry, it's about stability, trust, legacy." William's jaw tightened. "I don't recall inviting you here to vet my fiancé." "Perhaps you should have," Marcus said smoothly. "This company isn't just your personal kingdom. You carry responsibilities that extend beyond yourself." "Are you threatening me?" William asked softly. Marcus smiled. "Of course not. We're family." Eleanor finally spoke, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. "Don't pretend this is concern for William. This is control, nothing more." Marcus didn't blink. "Mother, you know as well as I do that perception matters." Eleanor turned toward Sarah now, her voice soft but clear. "Sarah, let me ask you something directly, since everyone seems so eager to circle around it." Sarah met her gaze. "Of course. Why do you want to marry my grandson?" The question landed like a weight. Sarah swallowed, forcing herself to breathe. The room waited, silent, heavy, watching her every move. And then, Sarah did something she hadn't planned. She told the truth. "Because he makes me feel safe," she said softly. "Because when I'm with him, I don't feel like I'm being measured or tested or compared to people I could never compete with. Because I've worked my whole life to build something from nothing, just like he did. And because, despite everything you all believe, I didn't come here chasing his money or his title." Her voice grew stronger. "I came here because he saw me, not what I pretend to be, but who I really am." Patricia opened her mouth, but Sarah raised her voice before she could speak again. "And if you think I came here to climb some invisible ladder, you're wrong. I've fought hard for everything I have. I'll keep fighting, whether I'm wearing a thrift store dress or a designer gown." The silence thickened again. Eleanor's lips twitched with the faintest hint of approval. But Marcus wasn't finished. He turned to William. "And what happens when this falls apart? When the media drags her name through the mud? When the shareholders panic?" "It won't," William said calmly. "You can't guarantee that." William stood then, his voice hardening. "No, but I can guarantee this. If the board forces me to choose between this company and Sarah, I will walk away from all of it." Marcus's face paled. "You're bluffing." "Test me." The room was frozen. Sarah's breath caught, heart pounding in her chest. She stared at William, stunned by the weight of what he'd just said. Patricia tried to recover. "You would give up everything for her?" William turned to Sarah, his voice quieter now, but steady. "For the first time in my life, I've found someone who matters more to me than this empire. And I won't lose her because you can't see past your obsession with appearances." Eleanor exhaled then, standing slowly from her chair, every head turned toward her. Her voice was quiet but carried more authority than all of them combined. "Marcus, Patricia, all of you." Her sharp eyes narrowed. "You forget yourselves. This family was not built on wealth. We built this from nothing. Your grandfather came here with $2 in his pocket, worked 12-hour days, and raised sons who worked alongside him. We didn't start with country clubs and charity galas. We started with sweat." She pointed to Sarah. "And this young woman, this strong, capable woman, is exactly the kind of person who belongs in this family. Not because of where she comes from, but because of who she is." She smiled now, a soft pride behind her words. "She reminds me of myself." No one spoke. Finally, Eleanor turned to William, her voice softening. "But there is one thing missing, William." He raised his brow. "What's that?" She reached into her purse, pulling out a small velvet box. "A proposal." William blinked. "Grandma, it was your mother's ring," Eleanor said, her voice breaking slightly. "She wanted me to give it to you when you found the one who would fight beside you." William's eyes flickered with emotion. Sarah's breath hitched. Slowly, he took the box from Eleanor and lowered himself to one knee, right there in front of his entire family. His voice shook but stayed steady. "Sarah, we've done this backward from the start. We pretended before we ever told the truth. But I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He opened the box. "Will you marry me? For real this time?" Sarah's hand flew to her mouth as tears welled up in her eyes. Her voice came out in a trembling whisper. "Yes!" A tear slid down William's cheek as he slipped the ring onto her finger. And in that moment, everything around them, the money, the judgment, the boardrooms, disappeared. All that remained was the two of them, standing in the center of a storm that no longer scared her. Chapter 9. The True Proposal. The days that followed passed like a surreal dream. Sarah still caught herself staring at the ring on her finger as if it might disappear at any moment. The vintage diamond sparkled softly in the morning light. Delicate, but strong. Like everything about this strange, impossible story they were building, she was no longer pretending. And that was what terrified her most. Eleanor was practically glowing. As the house buzzed with wedding preparations, she hovered around Sarah like a joyful general commanding her troops. Her sharp eyes missed nothing, from flower arrangements to seating charts. But beneath all the details was something much deeper. "You remind me of myself at your age," she said, one afternoon, sipping tea with Sarah in the sunroom. "Determined, stubborn, scared out of your mind." Sarah laughed softly. "I guess some things don't change." Eleanor's voice lowered, more serious now. "You're not afraid of the marriage, dear. You're afraid of what happens if it works." Sarah froze, blinking. Eleanor smiled kindly. "Because then, you'll have something to lose." The words landed, heavy but true. Sarah swallowed the lump in her throat, feeling the truth bloom painfully in her chest. Eleanor reached for her hand. "It's worth the risk." The wedding was scheduled for the following Saturday, a small private ceremony in the mansion's garden, exactly how Eleanor insisted. Sarah barely recognized the woman in the mirror on the morning of the ceremony. The dress Eleanor lent her was vintage lace, simple but elegant, with 3/4 sleeves and a delicate train. Helena had helped tailor it to fit perfectly. "You look like you belong here," Helena whispered, adjusting the small veil in Sarah's hair. Sarah's voice cracked. "That's the problem, isn't it? I've never belonged anywhere." Helena smiled softly, pulling her into a hug. "You belong where you are loved, Sarah. And you are very, very loved." The sun bathed the garden in warm afternoon light as guests gathered. It wasn't a spectacle, no grand displays or paparazzi, just a quiet, intimate gathering of people who mattered. Eleanor sat in the front row, beaming like her life's work had finally come full circle. William stood at the altar, dressed in a navy tuxedo, his hands folded in front of him. But when he saw Sarah step onto the petal-strewn aisle, his posture softened completely. Their eyes locked, and for a moment, everything else faded. Sarah's mother, standing beside Helena, whispered, her voice trembling, "Your father would be so proud." Tears stung Sarah's eyes. When she reached the altar, William gently took her hand. "You're breathtaking," he whispered. "I'm terrified," she whispered back. His lips curved into a soft smile. Me too. The ceremony was simple, filled with honest words and quiet promises. When it came time for the vows, William surprised her by pulling a small folded piece of paper from his pocket. I wrote and rewrote these a dozen times, he said softly, his voice catching. But in the end, there's no perfect way to explain what you mean to me. He looked directly into her eyes. You challenge me. You ground me. You remind me that love isn't about appearances or control. It's about trust, about laughter, about choosing each other every single day, even when it's messy, even when it's terrifying. His voice trembled. And I choose you, Sarah. Today, tomorrow, and for as long as you'll let me. Tears ran freely down Sarah's cheeks now. She barely heard the guests sniffing behind them. When it was her turn, she didn't need paper. She simply spoke from where her heart had been waiting. When we met, I was trying to push you away, she said softly. I wore disguises, told lies, hid behind my fear because I never believed someone like you could want someone like me. Her voice cracked, but she kept going. But you saw past all of it. You saw me before I even saw myself. You didn't just love the parts I polished up. You loved the messy, terrified, completely imperfect me. Her voice trembled but grew stronger. I promise to keep challenging you, to remind you that you're not alone, to fight with you and for you, even when life gets hard, and to love you fiercely with everything I have every single day. The officiant smiled, his own voice thick with emotion. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. William didn't wait for permission. He pulled Sarah into his arms and kissed her softly and then deeply as the small crowd erupted in quiet, joyful applause. For the first time since it all began, Sarah wasn't pretending to be anyone but herself. And for the first time, she was enough. The reception that followed was cozy and intimate. Eleanor and Sarah's mother hit it off immediately, sharing stories and recipes as though they'd known each other forever. Helena made a hilarious toast that had everyone laughing through their tears. Even Marcus, standing stiffly near the back of the garden, offered a polite, if slightly forced, nod of respect. As the evening drew to a close, Sarah and William sat together on the garden swing beneath the stars, their hands intertwined. The night air was warm, and the quiet hum of the city floated gently beyond the estate walls. William leaned closer, his voice playful now. Well, Mrs. Scott, how does it feel to be officially married to a completely insane billionaire? Sarah laughed, resting her head against his shoulder. Terrifying. He smiled. Still? Less than before, she whispered, but still a little. He kissed the top of her head. Then we'll be terrified together. She closed her eyes, breathing in the moment. For the first time in years, she wasn't worried about tomorrow. She wasn't fighting to survive. She wasn't running from who she was. She was home. Chapter 10. Building a life together. Months slipped by like petals drifting on a quiet stream. The mansion no longer felt foreign to Sarah. Slowly, room by room, it transformed from an untouchable museum into a home that breathed with life. The heavy silence was replaced by late-night conversations in the kitchen, bursts of laughter in the hallways, and warm sunlight streaming through windows that once felt too tall to belong to her world. The life she had once only watched from a distance was now hers. Sarah's bakery dream came to life faster than either of them expected. It started with a quiet conversation over coffee one morning. William had offered to fully fund it, but Sarah insisted they do it her way. Slowly, piece by piece, with savings, small loans, and a determination she refused to abandon. I want to build something that's mine, she told him. And William, true to his promise, respected that. Sarah's Sweets opened 6 months later in a little brick shop near Greenwich Village, not far from where she used to sell brigadeiros under a makeshift stand. The bakery became more than just a business, it became her heartbeat. Every day, Sarah woke before sunrise, handcrafting the same recipes her mother once taught her in their tiny apartment kitchen. Customers lined up daily, drawn in by the warmth, the laughter, and the unapologetic love she poured into every single sweet. Eleanor visited often, sitting by the window with her tea and proudly greeting customers like a co-owner. "This one," she'd say to strangers, pointing at Sarah, "is the best thing my grandson's ever done." William, too, found balance. With Sarah's quiet influence, he began to slowly loosen his iron grip on the company. He brought in trusted partners, allowed himself to take real vacations, and spent more evenings helping Sarah roll brigadeiros behind the bakery counter than sitting in late-night boardrooms. He laughed more. He slept better. And every night, when they crawled into bed, exhausted from their separate but now shared worlds, he would wrap his arms around Sarah and whisper softly into her hair, "You saved me." Sarah always whispered back, "You saved me first." Then came the morning that changed everything again. Sarah sat in the bakery's tiny office, staring at the small white stick trembling in her hand. 2 pink lines. Her breath hitched. She closed her eyes, pressing her palm against her chest to quiet the rush of emotions flooding her. Joy. Fear. Awe. More fear. The future was suddenly real again, bigger than the little bakery or the mansion or the battles they had already faced. A baby. Their baby? That evening she decided to tell him. She cooked one of his favorite dinners: roasted chicken, honey-glazed carrots, and garlic mashed potatoes. Candles flickered across the dining table, casting soft shadows on the walls. William arrived home as always, loosening his tie the moment he stepped through the door, smiling the moment he saw her. "You're spoiling me," he teased, kissing her forehead. "You deserve it," she whispered. But as they sat through dinner, Sarah could barely touch her food. The words sat in her throat, heavy and nervous. William noticed. His brow furrowed gently. "Are you all right?" She took a breath. "I have something to tell you." "Okay." His voice was calm but alert now. Sarah stood and stepped into the kitchen, returning with a small wrapped gift box. He opened it slowly, his hand steady but curious. Inside was a single baby shoe, pale blue, tiny, impossibly soft, resting atop a folded note. William unfolded the paper, reading the words written in Sarah's careful handwriting. "Patty, I can't wait to meet you. Love, Baby Scott." The silence that followed was electric. His eyes moved from the note to the tiny shoe, then back to Sarah. Her voice broke first. "I'm pregnant." William's breath caught. His hands trembled as he set the box down, standing slowly. We're having a baby?" he whispered. She nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. "Yes." For a moment he said nothing, as if his brain couldn't catch up to his heart. And then he crossed the room in 3 long strides, pulling her tightly into his arms, burying his face in her neck as his breath hitched with quiet, stunned laughter. "We're having a baby," he repeated against her skin, his voice full of awe. "Sarah, we're having a baby." Sarah laughed through her tears. "You're not scared." "I'm terrified," he whispered, "but I've never been happier." He dropped to his knees, pressing a soft kiss against her still flushed stomach. His voice cracked as he whispered, "Hi there, little one. I've been waiting for you." Sarah ran her fingers gently through his hair, her chest swelling with a kind of love so deep it frightened her. Not because it was uncertain, but because it was real. The next few months unfolded like a new season of their life. The nursery slowly came together, filled with Eleanor's old rocking chair, hand-painted walls, and bookshelves lined with children's books. William read every parenting book he could get his hands on, often quoting strange facts at odd hours that made Sarah burst into laughter. "You know," he said one night as they lay in bed, "the baby can start hearing our voices at 16 weeks." Sarah smiled, nesting closer. "Good. Then they'll know how much we love them before they even arrive." He kissed her forehead. "And they'll know how brave their mother is." The morning their child arrived, the sky outside was painted with soft pink streaks, as if the world itself was welcoming something new. Sarah's labor was long and exhausting, but William never left her side for a moment. "Breathe with me," he whispered, brushing damp strands of hair from her face. Hours later, the cries of a tiny voice filled the room, strong, vibrant, alive. "It's a boy," the doctor announced. As they placed the tiny, wriggling baby onto Sarah's chest, tears flooded both their eyes. He was perfect. Dark hair, tiny fingers, and curious eyes that blinked up at the world like it had already surprised him. William whispered, his voice shaking. "Welcome to the world, little one." Sarah kissed the top of their son's head, whispering back through her tears, "Our little miracle." In that moment, surrounded by love and warmth and the echo of all the impossible paths that led them here, Sarah knew this was never supposed to happen. And yet, it had. Not because of fate, not because of luck, but because, against all odds, two people from opposite worlds had taken the terrifying risk of simply choosing each other. Some stories aren't written like fairy tales. There are no glass slippers, no magic wands, no perfect timing. Just two people, broken in different ways, colliding in a world neither fully belonged to. Sarah never imagined that pretending to be someone else on a blind date would bring her here. To a husband who saw her before she saw herself, to a family built not by bloodlines but by choice, and to a life where every ordinary moment became extraordinary, simply because it was theirs. Years passed, gently, as they often do when love grows quietly beneath the surface. The bakery flourished, not because of investors or grand openings, but because of Sarah's steady hands, William's quiet support, and Eleanor's wise, mischievous spirit, cheering her on from her favorite window seat. William still walked her home after every late shift, still held her hand like he was afraid to let go, still whispered, "I love you," when the world grew loud and exhausting. Their son James, named after both William's late father and Sarah's grandfather, grew into a curious little boy with his mother's stubbornness and his father's quiet, watchful eyes. And sometimes, when the house was quiet, after the dishes were done and James was asleep, William would pull Sarah into his arms under the soft kitchen light and whisper, "You're still the best surprise that's ever happened to me." And Sarah would smile against his chest and whisper back, "I stopped pretending a long time ago." Because she had. Because she no longer needed the disguises or the costumes or the layers of fear to protect her. She was loved, fully, fiercely, completely. Exactly as she was. Love doesn't always arrive when we're ready for it. It sneaks in when we're scared, when we're unsure, when we've built walls so high we believe no one could possibly climb over them. But sometimes, someone does. Someone sees behind the armor, someone stays when it's easier to leave, someone fights for the version of us we're too afraid to show. And when that happens, when you finally take off every mask and simply allow yourself to be seen, that's when real love begins. Not the perfect kind, the honest kind, the kind that lasts. If Sarah and William's story touched your heart, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us which moment made you believe in their love. And if you've ever found someone who saw you for who you truly are, tell us your story. Remember, sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones we never planned for. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next story. And if you want more beautiful, emotional love stories, click right here on the final screen.